Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to Super Lunch Post Podcast, episode number 170. I am Brendan. UFC 279, Diaz versus Ferguson. Nate Diaz versus Tony Ferguson after many changes, but we will talk about that. Talk about Kevin Holland versus Khamzat Chimaev. Daniel Rodriguez versus Jingliang. Macy Chiasson versus Irene Aldana, and that will be the main card. So we'll discuss the main card here. If you're looking for the prelims, that'll be in the next video. So if you like MMA, if you like podcasts about MMA, if you like the UFC, Bellator, PFL, ONE FC, I cover all that stuff here, put out 2 or 3 videos a week. Subscribe to the channel so you know when the next video is coming out. All right, let's talk about the main event and how it made me feel sad in multiple ways, okay? Multiple ways. All right, Nate Diaz taking on Tony Ferguson. So if you didn't know, Nate Diaz was supposed to take on Khamzat Chimaev. And Chimaev missed weight by about 8 pounds, which was unacceptable. Nate Diaz didn't want to take it. It's his right. I'm bored with that. I have had the exact same tune. I've sang the exact same note for 5 years now. Missing weight is sanctioned cheating. I understand that MMA put on like a thing with like, you know, the unsaid rules or whatever, unspoken rules, and one of them is you don't miss weight, and it made out like the fans out to be overly critical about the practice about missing weight, saying that, oh, you know, these people might have a hard weight cut, but regardless, the fans get overly. You know what? This is one of those situations where, yes, an overzealous fan, someone who is overly critical, someone who is hyperbolic, all those things, they can come out, they can be like flamboyant and angry about the fact that somebody missed weight and spat out a bunch of bullshit. But there is a science and a logic to disagreeing with the practice of allowing a fighter to miss weight and still fight. Now, if the other fighter accepts that fight, there is no problem, in my opinion, with the fight continuing. But as far as I'm concerned, the punishment is does not fit the crime, really. So what you're doing is you're taking that fighter's pay. And I've also been on record multiple times saying affecting fighter pay should be the last thing we're doing as far as a punishment goes from missing weight. It doesn't seem to dissuade cheaters. It doesn't seem to dissuade people from continuing on. It doesn't dissuade people from taking a fight on short notice that they can't make the weight for. It just punishes them, and it's not severe enough as far as the punishment goes. Like, I don't agree with it because I don't think it's fair to the fighter to take his pay away. But I also think that it should affect the fight because it doesn't. A win is a win. So Nate Diaz, in this case, I'm not being critical of either one of these fighters, so we'll move on. But if a fighter wins, you know, looking at their fighter history and their record, their Wikipedia page, which is what a lot of people do, they see a W, right? And in the eyes of the UFC, a W often takes you to a higher payday or a higher profile fight, moving towards a title in some cases. That's a higher payday, higher profile fight that moves your career forward in terms of title shot advancement, monetary advancement, and all for what? You have to give up half your purse, which in some case would be like $2,500. Right. So I don't want them to lose the money. What should be done is there should be an automatic point deduction. You should start at a disadvantage because your opponent is starting at a disadvantage to you. Now, it should be negotiable. Like, how many points do you want to give up? Because now there's a real discussion. Like, oh, if I have to give up, you know, a point every single round because I missed weight by 5 pounds, maybe I don't take the fight. Maybe we have more canceled fights. Fine. I'd rather have that than have people miss weight. Luckily, or strangely, we didn't have to deal with any of that because Nate Diaz took on Tony Ferguson was supposed to take on Jingliang at 170 pounds. So this was a welterweight bout that took place at 170. Fair enough. So let's get into this actual fight instead of me rambling on about how I feel about fighters missing weight, regardless of why they do. So, round by round here, dude. Nate Diaz ends up getting the submission in the 4th round, quite impressively, I might add. Getting the guillotine on the first real attempt where Tony Ferguson, it wasn't his first takedown attempt. His first successful takedown, he falls right into a guillotine. Nate Diaz cinches it up really tight, and Ferguson ends up submitting. That's impressive in what it is, and it's very cool. I want to talk round by round, and I want to go a little over Tony Ferguson and what this means for him, and possibly what it means for Nate Diaz, although I think his future is more up in the air. Tony looked really old, and he is not the same boogeyman that he was 5 years ago. And I know that should be an obvious statement. Me saying that a fighter now is older than he was 5 years ago seems kind of ridiculous. Because I'm just pointing out what I would consider the obvious and what a lot of people should, and it's, on the face of it, should say, oh yeah, he's 5 years older than he was 5 years ago. No shit. Well, in this scenario, he's not moving the same. He didn't look like he was moving right. Normally, he's very smooth, like even in his warm-up when he's sliding across on the knee and slides back on the knee. Didn't look good. It didn't look... He wasn't moving right. In the first round, he was very awkward. He was overextending, and not awkward in the way of Tony Ferguson. So a lot of these things I'm going to say are going to come off as like, oh, well, this guy doesn't know how Tony Ferguson fights. I might not know everything, but that's a silly statement. I've been watching Tony Ferguson fight for well over 5 years now, probably closer, for sure since his UFC debut. And this is also, here's the other side of this. I just want to, one more preface, and then I will just get into what I saw here. Tony Ferguson, in my opinion, was the uncrowned king at 155 for 4 years. This stretch right here, 12 wins in a row, from 2013 to 2019 undefeated. Never once getting a real title shot or fighting for the real title because of bullshit injury or his opponent having to pull out, Khabib. This guy was the boogeyman. Nobody wanted to fight him. They didn't, because there was no win for them. Best case scenario, you go in there and your face gets battered up and you lose, and now you get sent back to the bottom of the queue. For what? Meanwhile, during this time, we had Anthony Pettis as the champion. We had, good grief. We had Anthony Pettis. We had Rafael dos Anjos as the champion. We had Eddie Alvarez as the champion. Then Conor McGregor. All this time, all of those people, Tony Ferguson could have beat. Now, this is not me trying to be, retroactive Nostradamus here. I'm not being an asshole saying that like, oh, for sure, I'm like a Tony Ferguson fanboy. Oh, he would have beaten everybody. He would have destroyed all of them. It's not what I'm saying. Although he did beat Rafael dos Anjos and he did beat Anthony Pettis, but those weren't at the time when they were the champion. So, right, this is not an exact 1-to-1. The point is, this guy should have fought for the title multiple times. Could have been the 155 champ and defended it multiple times. But due to shitty circumstances, Conor McGregor holding up the division, Khabib being injured and eating tiramisu and not being able to make weight, all that ended up in this Tony Ferguson, like destroying Tony Ferguson's prime as far as his ability to become the champion. And then he ran into Justin Gaethje, who again, I am a huge fan of. And he got mauled. He got destroyed in that fight. And I don't think he's looked the same since. The Charles Oliveira fight, he took a little bit of damage, but really it was on the ground. And he was, constantly under submission. Sorry if I'm a little stuffy. I've been very sick. Charles Oliveira didn't lay out a ton of damage. Beneil Dariush controlled him, didn't lay out a ton of damage. Michael Chandler. Now, let's talk about that one. Overall, in that first round, not a ton of damage. In fact, I thought Tony Ferguson did fine. I don't remember how I scored it, but I remember it being close. And in the second round, Michael Chandler lands the front kick of all front kicks to end front kicks. Dude, it was just a fucking football punt thrown in the perfect place and just happened to land right on his chin as he was moving and sent him to hell, man. It was bad. And this is his first fight since then, in which he's already been declining. He's 38 years old. His style has remained relatively the same, being awkward and all this other stuff. And I don't think, I could be wrong. Maybe, I hope I'm wrong. Maybe he just had a bad camp, or something's going on with his body that he, because he is getting older and he wasn't recovering right, and maybe he'll bounce back and look like the old Tony Ferguson. But since that Justin Gaethje fight, he has not looked the same. He has taken an ungodly amount of damage in the UFC. His chin still seems to be there, but his movement isn't. His movement's not right. His body doesn't connect. I'm getting Chuck Liddell versus Tito Ortiz number 4, whatever the hell that was, when they fought in that bullshit organization for that one fight. I'm getting those vibes from him. He's not quite there yet, but his movement is bad. He's not moving right. And that being said, Nate Diaz doesn't have a lot of fancy footwork and movement anyway. He's just constantly pressuring forward. And throughout this fight, Tony Ferguson was laying into that front leg. And I actually had it. So the first round I gave to Tony. I felt like he landed more damage in that first round. I felt like Tony landed the better shots. I felt like his leg kicks were hard. I thought he did more damage in that first round. A gash opened up on his left leg from a kick he threw. And then in the second round, I felt like Diaz did more. And you look at the striking numbers here, 28-20. It was a wider gap, and I felt like he landed some better shots in that round, so I gave it to him. And then in the third round, Tony Ferguson led out that first round with some really good leg kicks, doing damage. Diaz had his moments. There were points where Diaz was actually turning around. He was like standing on the side, not moving around. And I think he was, playing up his persona, but also giving his leg a break because he was having problems moving on it and trying to get Tony to rush to him instead of being evasive and elusive. I gave Tony Ferguson that third round. So all that stuff I said about Tony Ferguson not looking the same, I feel like he could have beaten Nate Diaz had he not gone for that takedown and had the fight continued on the right way, right? I feel like he could have gotten a decision. But in the fourth round, fates be it what they are. He just went for a takedown, got him down, and Diaz cinched up a guillotine, landed it real tight, and that was the end. Good on Nate Diaz. I felt like Diaz was fighting his fight. He was doing what he had to do, toughing out those leg kicks, moving forward, fighting a picture-perfect fight for him. And it's beatable. We know how. Everybody knows how to beat Diaz. Not everybody can, because not everybody can implement that game plan over especially 5 rounds with Diaz's cardio. Tony Ferguson seemed like he could normally do that. And I think if this fight takes place 4 years ago, Tony Ferguson mops the floor with him, makes him look stupid. But Nate Diaz has taken less punishment because he's just fought less. And yeah, he's got a lot of scar tissue, this and that, but he's just taken a lot less punishment. And he's aged, oddly enough. I know he slurs his words a little bit, but part of that is just his accent anyway. Dude, it was hard to watch. I didn't feel good. I almost don't even like talking about this because it doesn't feel good to see, one of my favorite fighters decline like this. I get this feeling every so often when I'm watching certain fights. When I'm watching like a veteran take on a veteran, like Jim Miller versus Donald Cerrone. They've got some miles on them, and they're still competitive in their own way, but watching them against each other, it feels okay. It feels right because they're both still with it. They both are still, though they are diminished because they're older, it's just the way things are, they're still competitive, and they could beat a lot of people in their divisions. It's just not, it's not the same as this, where I see a guy who has declined so much that it takes away from his game plan and it takes away from who he is as a fighter. And I don't want to see Tony Ferguson fight anymore. I've never been one to call for someone's retirement. I don't think that's my decision or anybody else's decision to make. But I wasn't super excited for this fight. I wasn't super excited for Ferguson to take on Jingliang. I felt like he was going to get fucking murdered. And this is what it is. And I'm not I'm not super excited about it. I'm not. I don't want to watch him fight anymore. And I hope that he retires. Maybe he takes on one more veteran fight, but I think it's time for him to be done. I really do. And it sucks. And of course, the big story here, I haven't talked about it. Nate Diaz fights out the end of his contract. This is his last fight in the contract. He wins in spectacular fashion. He gets, to go into the open market and do other things. He talked about moving on to other sports, but he wasn't very specific. So we'll see what happens. But my guess is he's going to go into boxing, go make some money over there, and I think he'll do pretty well. I feel like he can beat up a lot of people in boxing. That's always been his forte. His cardio is fantastic, and I feel like he can wear a lot of people down. I want to talk about the Floyd Mayweather, Conor McGregor fight. You think Nate Diaz couldn't have beat Floyd Mayweather at that weight class? Come on. With how diminished he was, and what really got Conor was the fact that he was tired. Now, do I think Nate would have gone out there and smoked him? No, and I don't know if he would have won either, because Mayweather could have just played with him, and Diaz, being who he is, might have just taken a lot of, small bits of punishment at a time and ended up losing a decision. But I would argue that his ability to compete in boxing is far greater than Conor McGregor's. All right, let's move on here. Something less sad, more fun, more future implications of fun fighters. Kevin Holland stepping up on super short notice to fight Khamzat Chimaev. Now, Holland was supposed to take on, oh, good grief. Was he supposed to take on D-Rod, Daniel Rodriguez? Anyway, there was some shit talking backstage. This fight got made. Chimaev, so let's talk about what led up to this, because I know it's whatever. It's, the thing. So Chimaev misses weight by like 7 or 8 pounds, and that's just unacceptable. The reason for that was the doctor told him to stop making weight, or stop cutting weight. He says he could have made it, but it was a doctor's call. Now the UFC comes out and says, well, the doctors told him to stop. Okay. We've ran into this situation before. Yoel Romero was told to stop, even though he was only 1 pound off. We've ran into this situation. Does it make it okay? No. That means he wasn't in a position where he could safely have cut the weight as far as the doctors were concerned. Nevada is not known for making people stop their weight cut early as far as like a less experienced commission. I'm not glorifying or congratulating the commission on making him stop. I'm just saying that if you're going to go with like, oh, well, they made a mistake, maybe, but they're not known, like that's not their thing. We've seen it in New York, we've seen it in Illinois, we've seen it in Texas. The commission's making stupid decisions, letting people use inhalers, cutting fights early, like making people stop cutting weight, doctors having less experience with the weight cut so that they're more afraid of the fighter, more afraid for the fighter's safety and health. So we've seen all these things. Vegas has tons of experience with this stuff. Chimaev screwed up. He did. He came in too heavy, and for whatever reason, his body didn't respond the way it normally does, and because of that, he missed his opportunity to fight Nate Diaz and get a huge payday. Maybe not. Maybe his fight purse is the same. Could have elevated his popularity, though. I would have loved to see him throw around Nate Diaz and see if he could submit Diaz. That's a huge feather in anyone's cap. But what he does to Kevin Holland is also impressive. He comes out there, man, just guns blazing, goes for a takedown almost immediately, gets Holland down. Holland rolls around. He picks Holland up, slams him down, rolls around with, and Holland is just scrambling around and moving. It was actually very interesting how well Holland was able to fend off Chimaev's submission attempts and these grappling exchanges. And I would have loved to see how this would have gone if Chimaev didn't get that finish. Because Holland has good cardio. He's obviously fine in the grappling department. His striking isn't bad. Striking is actually very good. So had Chimaev not gotten that submission finish, which he did, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He just fucking got Okay, there's like, I'm not looking for Chimaev to get tested any more than he did against Gilbert Burns. I thought he showed enough mettle in that fight to answer any of the questions and silence any of the doubters as far as his ability to compete at the highest level. But in this fight, I wanted to see a little bit more competition from Holland, just a little bit longer, to see what would happen if Chimaev's cardio could hold up after just sprinting like that, just all-out sprinting, trying to get that finish. I wanted to see what would happen. Now, looking at the rankings here. Sorry. What do you do with Chimaev? What do you do with Chimaev now? Right? Do you let him go up to middleweight and challenge for a title? Because, oh no, Whitaker's got Pereira to fight. So he can't go up there right now. He already fought Burns. Covington's probably not going to take that fight. You got Usman, who's probably getting the rematch against Edwards, barring injury or some crazy scheduling. But based off what I've seen from Chimaev, do I think he could beat Leon Edwards? Absolutely. So are you going to have Bilal Muhammad take on Chimaev? I don't want to see that. Bilal Muhammad's on a good win streak. He should be fighting, the likes of Colby Covington, and to try and get up there. Chimaev's already got that. Kamaru Usman, the only reason that this is in question is because Usman absolutely deserves a rematch. And he should. Everything indicates that he's going to get it. So what do we do with Chimaev in the meantime? And he said he wanted to, maybe go up to middleweight and take that belt too. I'll kill everybody, the same rhetoric that he's been spouting. So do we think he's going to go up there and challenge for a title? No, because there's already one booked. Now, if Alex Pereira falls out, or there isn't something, or Adesanya falls out, and maybe maybe he could go up there, but I think there's an argument for Robert Whitaker to fight for any interim title at middleweight. So I don't want to hear that shit about Chimaev going up there and leapfrogging Robert Whitaker for any reason. So my opinion is either he fights Covington, which I don't think is going to happen. I don't want to see him fight Muhammad. There's nothing to gain from that. It just hurts Bilal Muhammad. Now, I'm not trying to protect Bilal here. I'm just saying it just hurts him. It does nothing for Chimaev, other than give him a fight. It doesn't elevate his status. It doesn't move him up the rankings at all. I think taking on Colby Covington is pretty much the only fight that makes sense, other than fighting for the title against Leon Edwards. So it's unfortunate, but that's the way it is, guys. Like, there's just nowhere for him to go, and this is what happens when you have a long-reigning champion losing their belt like when they did. Because think about this. If Kamaru Usman doesn't lose the belt, Chimaev is absolutely fighting for the title next. And I think that would be a banger of a fight. All right, Daniel Rodriguez versus Li Jingliang. This took place at a catchweight. D-Rod was at like 180 pounds, and Liang was at, he would cut for a 170 fight, obviously, because he was supposed to fight Tony Ferguson. This fight was very competitive, and we are going to go over it round by round here, and I'm going to tell you, okay, I'll tell you why I think, so Lee ends up losing a split decision, and Mike Bell, who is a very good judge, went the way of D-Rod, and I understand why. I don't agree with it. So D-Rod was mostly moving forward, and he was looking to land his hooks, and Lee was looking to land hooks. Rodriguez is famous for throwing out the jab, like tons of them, throwing out jab, and he has a really good, strong jab, but you got to throw something behind it, and he didn't do a lot of damage outside of the jab for most of these rounds. For all three rounds, a lot of it was just throwing out that jab. In fact, he didn't land the jab as much as he normally does in that first round. D-Rod landed the best headshots in this first round, but arguably, Jingliang landed the better shots and more damage. It just, they happened to be to the body and to the legs, and that's where a lot of these judges miss the mark. If you want to look at the body, 8 to the body, 12 to the legs from Liang, and then D-Rod landing 10 upstairs as opposed to the 7. I thought even that, he was ahead on significant strikes. I feel like he was ahead on damage. I don't see how you could say that he wasn't ahead on damage. Liang should have won that first round. So I had him winning that first round. The second round here is a little bit closer, and arguably in the second round, you can give it to D-Rod if you consider these jabs to the head as more significant strikes than the things that Liang was landing, including the largest strike or the hardest strike landed in the entire fight, which was by Lee. So Lee was bouncing and moving on his feet really well. He was looking for openings, and D-Rod was reaching to land the jab, which he did plenty of times. Lee finally landed a big right hand, and he just started peppering Rodriguez the entire round. I felt like he landed the better shots in this round, and he did more damage. Did D-Rod land more shots? Absolutely. Did he land more significant strikes? Absolutely. 34-24 in favor of D-Rod. But do I think any of them had the sting on them that one shot from Lee did? No. Do I think that those body shots from Lee outdo any of the jabs that D-Rod was throwing? Absolutely. So Liang, in my opinion, won that second round, putting him up 2 rounds to 0, 2 rounds to none, and all he has to do is coast for the finish. And this last round was actually pretty damn close too. It wasn't a blowout, 34-27 in favor of D-Rod, which I did give him this last round. I've never been high on D-Rod's abilities or his fighting style. I feel like, his jab's really good and he has power, but, it isn't effective when you're getting out-damaged, which I felt like he was. This last round in total strikes was even, in comparative strikes was even closer. It was only a seven strike difference as compared to the second round. So, Lee didn't land a very significant strike in this last round that outweighed all the stuff that D-Rod was doing. So that's why I gave it to him. And you look, it was completely like, it was almost like headhunting from Rodriguez. 25 strikes to the face, and most of those were jabs, and that's fine. But those body shots and those leg kicks from Lee, there's nothing to sniff at, and they're fucking hard shots, man. I gave D-Rod the last round, giving Lee the fight 29-28. I agree with Ron McCarthy here. I feel like they missed the mark on this one. I feel bad for Lee because he's kind of got screwed over here, and then the laissez-faire attitude that D-Rod had after the fight, saying like, "Oh yeah, definitely. I feel like I really did what I was came in here to do." I don't think so. I don't feel like he did. He's beat a lot of like okay fighters. He's got the Tim Means, Dwight Grant's a good win. Mike Perry win. That's a whatever win. And then Kevin Lee, which is again at the time, I guess you can consider impressive, but retroactively and looking back, I don't think it's as impressive as it was at the time. So yeah, I think he's a fine fighter, and this was a competitive fight. I don't think it was a blowout, and I don't think it's a robbery, but I will argue that Lee should have won that fight, and it's very unfortunate that this happens, where Lee goes in there to fight Tony Ferguson, then takes his fight on less than 24 hours notice. He broke up a fight backstage, did all the good guy things, doing everything he's supposed to do, and things that he's not even supposed to do, but being a good person, and just fucking get screwed over. It's really unfortunate seeing that crap. All right, let's talk about Macy Chiasson versus Irene Aldana. This one ended really weird. Aldana ends up getting the KO in the last round via up kick to the liver. This fight was competitive. This first round was competitive on the feet, but then Chiasson goes for a takedown, falls into an armbar almost immediately somehow. Like, I don't know how that happened. Aldana rolls over and gets an armbar, and Aldana absolutely won that first round. And then the second round was a complete flip-flop. Good striking on the feet from Chiasson moving forward. She ends up getting a takedown and then riding the back of Aldana, moving into good position, throwing in the body triangle, doing tons of damage, landing elbows, just beating the shit out of Aldana in that second round. The third round looks like it was kind of going the same way. It looked like it was gonna go that way. The striking numbers are in favor of Macy. She was moving forward, got Aldana down on the ground, and then Aldana throws an up kick, and then Macy collapses, and nobody knows why, and it turns out it landed right to the liver. So good on Irene to just not quit. Just constantly fighting, going for it. And yet again, we see just a region. Oh yeah, this was a catchweight fight too. Irene Aldana couldn't get past Holly Holm, but she could beat, Macy Chiasson, and she couldn't beat Raquel Pennington back in the day. Now she has improved quite a bit since 2019, so I'm not gonna. And then she beat Ketlin Vieira, who has had her own, surge and saying like how good she is in this shit. And dude, this division is just all over. Like, these divisions are all over the place. 135, 145. These divisions are all over the place. There's just so much going on. That's just, it's hard to get excited about a fighter on the come up, or excited because, maybe there's just not enough to see what's going on. Maybe not enough, whatchamacallit, press, not enough coverage, maybe not enough advertisement for these fighters, but it's hard to get excited for these divisions. 135, 145 in the female division's hard. 125 is better because we have some 115ers who come up and take on Valentina, so it makes it interesting. 115 strawweight absolutely is a banger. It was one of the best divisions in the UFC. But 125, a little thin. 135, very thin. 145, non-existent. So, and we do have one of those to talk about on the prelims, which I will do in the next video. First fight on the card, Johnny Walker finally getting back. Oh, thank God. Finally getting back in the winner's column. It's just good to see him win. I don't have much to say about this fight. Not a lot to take away here. He ends up getting control and getting a submission win. Gets it back, gets a rear naked choke on Ian. Cutelaba, dude, he's hit or miss literally and figuratively, but he's kind of, he does not belong in the UFC. He just doesn't. So what does this mean for Johnny Walker? That he beat a guy who he should have beaten. So that's good, and I'm not upset at that. I am actually very excited for Johnny Walker to actually move forward in this division again, using his newfound skill set, his newfound discipline, his more reserved nature, but was still with the power and a little bit of craziness mixed in. I feel like he's got all the tools except for a chin to really take it to the next level in the light heavyweight division. So, hopefully that's what we'll get from him, and I'm really excited to see him go forward, and I hope I really do. I think that he could challenge, and he's ranked number 13, guys. He's not a bad fighter. He's not, he still can challenge. I just want to see him be able to put things together because he's a fun fighter to watch, and I really feel like he can challenge a lot of these guys in the upper light heavyweight division because it's not thin, but there's a lot of parity, and it's exciting parity. It's fun, and there's a lot of new names in there, and I think that he could be thrown back in to see some more exciting fights. So that is it for the main card. Like I said, the prelims are going to be on the next video. Thank you guys so much for spending your time here. It means a lot to me. Thanks for stopping by. If this is the only video you watch, again, thank you. I hope you guys have an amazing week. Enjoy your time with your family. Enjoy the last little bit of decent weather we have here in the Midwest, and love y'all.